Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the show. So this week, it's a themed show. This week in the basement, we are celebrating electronic music of all kinds, and more specifically, synthesizers. Let's synthesize that.
Synthesizer.
Now, I should emphasize that I am not a synthesizer expert, folks. I am merely a frustrated musician and a music lover. I just really like how some synthesizers sound. So the choices this evening are made mostly at random, or because I enjoy the particular sonic quality of this particular piece of music. I think the playlists have to be and are necessarily subjective. So if I left out the greatest
synthesizer
tune of all time, forgive me in advance. Now, the first thing you heard this evening was Wendy Carlos talking to us and demonstrating the Moog synthesizers. Wendy Carlos is one of the greatest synth pioneers in the world. And then after Wendy speaking, you heard a piece of her music from the soundtrack to The Shining, the Kubrick film The Shining from 1980. She's two tracks that are on The Shining soundtrack. I've always thought that the soundtrack on that movie is like an extra character. And Wendy Carlos, she did the score to The Shining. She did the score to another Kubrick film, A Clockwork Orange, in 1971. And she also did the score to the original Tron movie in 1982. There's an interesting story about how Wendy Carlos met Robert Moog, who is Mr. Moog, the guy that invented the Moog. So in 1964, she was a student at Columbia University. She was a music composition student. And she went to this engineering convention and she met Robert Moog. And she says at the meeting, it was a perfect fit. He was a creative engineer who spoke music, and I was a musician who spoke science. It felt like a meeting of simpatico minds. So in 1966, a collaboration began on a custom modular synthesizer that would be used on her debut studio album, which was released in 1968 called Switched On Bach. Now, this was an electronic interpretation of works composed by Johann Sebastian Bach. It went on to win 3 Grammys, and it entirely changed the kind of landscape for electronic music. It dragged it kind of into the mainstream. Like up until that point, synthesizers had been just used in very much under the radar experimental music. So just on a point of order here before we continue, Robert Moog was once asked by an interviewer for the definitive pronunciation of his name, and he said very clearly it rhymes with Vogue. That's the usual German pronunciation. I like the way that pronunciation sounds better than the cow's Moog sounds. So, the real correct pronunciation of Moog is Moog. I guess it's like the Bowie conversation. You know, it's whatever you choose. I'd probably fluctuate over the course of the evening. We'll continue. We're going to have some music from Laurie Anderson, herself another visionary when it comes to electronic music and synthesizer. And this is from her 1982 album called Big Science. And this is Let X Equal X.